All right, it is 5 o'clock. I'll call the special board meeting to order. May I have roll call for attendance, please?
Wong,
Here.
Miller,
Present.
Levy.
Did you say Levy?
I did.
Here.
Larson,
Here.
Jacobs,
Here, Michelle, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Delgado,
Here.
Anderson.
Here.
All members are present virtually.
May I have approval of the agenda, please?
I gotta think, yeah.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the agenda? Okay. See none. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved, which brings us to our first agenda item, was introductions. Dan Urad from WSB was not able to be with us tonight, but we have Louise with us who will be facilitating our short-term goals this evening. So I will turn it over.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Yes, Dan Nearett had a scheduling conflict, so I'm the best next person to come and help you with your goals. And I'm really happy to be here. And I think that it's really great that you're taking some time right now in this uncertain environment to really look at what your priorities are. So before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then if we could do a quick intro for me, that would be great. I've been with WASB for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was a superintendent and then curriculum director in Green Bay. Superintendent in Kiel, retired 3 years ago, and I'm really enjoying my time with school boards. And we do a lot of this work with helping you set goals and do some of those things. So what I would like to do is if you could go around and just introduce yourselves and what you do, and then tell me one strength that you feel that Beloit has, something that would say Beloit really gets this right. Because truthfully, I don't know a lot about your district, and I'm hoping to learn some feedback from you. So what's going well? So your name, your role, and then what do you think Beloit is doing really well? And I've got a list here, so I'll call on you. How about that? Amy, would you like to start?
Sure, why not? Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Amy Levy. One great thing about our district, there's so many, we are passionate in general and particularly about our kids. We voice our opinions. We don't allow people to silence us, and we're willing to roll up our sleeves and do the work.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Dan.
Hi, Dan Kieser. I'm superintendent. I am starting my second full week in the role and getting to know the district. And I would absolutely echo Amy's comment that being open and direct, I would say one strength that I've seen here in my time is lots of passion and opportunity. There's no loss of great ideas. It's just a question of how do we bring those ideas together into action. So
excellent. Thank you, Dan. Dean. Dean Larson. Is Dean with us?
This is Stephanie Jacobs. He has no audio. I just discovered that earlier when I was trying to communicate with him.
Okay, I see his microphone is off, so he's not able to, or on.
He makes this available to all of us. He's our tech guru.
Oh, he's just a recorder. Oh, got it. Not just, by the way, Dean, you've got a pretty important role there. Okay, how about Joanne? Joanne Armstrong.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Joanne Armstrong. Thanks for being with us. I'm the Executive Director of Business, HR, and Operations for the school district. Been here for 5 years, and what I would say the district does well is we have a tremendous community. Our students are the greatest that I'm partial, I guess. I think that we have great staff, great students. The community is committed, as Amy had mentioned. They are very much involved in our day-to-day. And we have highly dedicated staff. So I think we do well, and we offer great opportunities with our facilities and our technology.
Lots of things. Thank you, Joanne. John Wong.
Okay, I guess when you go later, all the good answers have been taken already. No, John Wong. I'm a lifelong resident of Beloit. I really don't have a lot more to add. I mean, the passion, the dedication that we have within the community, the staff members, all of those. I mean, that's what makes Beloit what it is. I mean, it's yeah. So I'm really can't add a lot more than what's already been said.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Kyle.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, John, you're right. The people in the community in our district are the best. I think if I had to pick single one thing, our staff, our students, you couldn't ask for anything better. We really have a tremendous, dedicated, knowledgeable, powerful staff.
Excellent. Thank you, Kyle. Maria.
Hi.
Hi, Maria.
I'm Maria Delgado. This is like my first year on the board. Okay. So I am learning, but I know a lot about the community. And we are very diverse. We have a very diverse community. I think we are rich in perspectives, a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of different viewpoints. And I think that's what makes us so great, that we can, put all different minds together and come up with great ideas. So, yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Megan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Miller. I'm the vice president. This is my second year on the school board. I'm a proud, adopted Beloit as my hometown. I've been here about 10 years. So I would just obviously echo everything that's been said. I think the greatest strength that our school district and our community has is its passion to do better for our kids. I would say that we have an underutilized pool of community organizations and folks who want to be a part of kind of lend a hand and boost up all of our kids. I think one of the criticisms we get a lot is actually one of our greatest strengths. People say, well, I really want more input and I really want to help more in our district. And I think that's the greatest strength in our community is the willingness for the whole community, regardless of their perspectives, really to share all of them, come together and try and do better for all of our kids. Outstanding community and absolutely, of course, an outstanding staff.
Excellent. Thank you, Megan. Melissa.
Hi. Sorry,
Hi.
it took me a second to find my mute button. Hi, I'm Melissa Beavers. I hope you're referring to me, Melissa Beavers. I've been here since 2007. I'm the interim director or executive director of pupil services. Obviously, it's been a while since I've been in Beloit. Beloit's a great place to be. I didn't know where I was winding up when I moved here from Colorado. And I am happy to say I would not go anywhere else. We've got a great community of families and super up and coming, eclectic community, which I love. I raise kids around here, and that's something that I really, really enjoy is connecting with the community, the family, and the students all in one. So it's a great place to be, and I'm happy to have been here for over a decade.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Michelle. I know Michelle is our assistant. She's going to help us out today, but I'm sure she has something to share about the greatest things from Beloit. Is Michelle here? No. Okay. How about Monica?
Thank you. I'm Monica Christopa. I handle the marketing and communications for the school district of Beloit. So actually, I have two things. A little bit to Megan's point, as part of my responsibilities, managing the volunteer program. And I'm always amazed by the number of people who are willing to volunteer and that capacity to show up when needed. Amazing. And the other strength I find is that people are not afraid to ask the tough questions, whether it's staff or parents or board members or cabinet or whoever. Asking some tough questions to bring us to a really to help us align with the vision and mission of the district. So I think staff certainly, but those other two components.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica. Peggy.
Hi, I'm Peggy Mellencamp, Executive Director of School Leadership and Equity. And I echo what's been said before, and I will add two things. Community partnerships are very strong. We have a number of community, along with volunteers, but businesses and organizations that support our schools and our students, and then opportunities for our students. We've got a collegiate academy and offer a wide variety of programs, both in the arts and athletics and extracurriculars for our students.
Excellent. Thank you, Peggy. And Spencer.
Hello, my name is Spencer Anderson. This is my first year on the school board. And the one thing I gotta say that the district does really well is being a former student from here too, that the teachers, we have such an amazing staff. The teachers are always there for the kids. They're always trying to work for them and do the best they possibly can for each kid.
Excellent. Thank you. And Stephanie.
Hi, I'm actually, I guess a transplant. That was interesting. I didn't realize Missy was from Colorado, but I moved here too over 20 years ago. And this is also, as Megan said, my adopted hometown. I'm a former principal with the district, a proud principal, because I had the opportunity to work with fantastic staff. And I think one of the greatest strengths, besides everything that's been listed, is I've never been in a district where there was so much caring for the children.
Wow. Boy, I've heard some really positive things about your district, and I appreciate you sharing those with me. The thing about it is we also want to make sure that these important things about our district, about Beloit, is getting out to the public. And one of the ways you can do that is by setting goals. And so I think that this is a great step of, getting to your priorities. And I haven't been completely part of the conversation about goals, but what I'm hearing is, and how this agenda was developed, was that you wanted to start out with some short-term goals from now until maybe September, October, correct? And then that would be a lead into, at some point when some of these current issues are resolved, that or those other goals, that you will go into your strategic planning or maybe some long-range goals. Am I correct on that? Okay.
That's goals to be completed September, October, and then another set of goals to be completed throughout the school year. And then in the meantime, we would start that strategic planning process. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me talk about then our purpose and maybe the scope of what we're going to try to do tonight, and then some deliverables that we'd like to have done by the end of this evening. So the purpose obviously is to set some of these goals and to really hone in on your clear expectations. And also, I know you're going to transition into a new superintendency. This will help Dan as you transition as well, knowing that these are some priority areas that your board wants to work for. And it also is an opportunity to hold the system accountable in a public way. Because if you're going to set these goals, and I'll walk through a form that we have, that there is a recording or a progress report that the board would want to hear about on an ongoing basis, just to make sure that you're making progress, which then again gets out into the community and the public and shows them that you are leading the district in the correct direction and that you are listening to them as communities. So it's going to build public will, and you're going to learn together as a team. So just looking at the agenda then, we want to discuss some goal considerations. I think we confirmed the calendar for a period of goals up through October, correct? Do you have the agenda in front of you or not? Or you do? Does everyone know? Do you have access to the agenda? Because I'm just going to go through that. Okay. And then the approximate number of goals. Now, we know that they're short term, so that's something that you want to get done in the near future by September. So what would be an appropriate amount of goals that you think you could achieve from now until September?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think it's beneficial to start to have the discussion about the goals, and then once we know what the goals are, we can know what we can manage between now and December, instead of giving a number like, well, we could do 7 goals, etc. Yeah. So there's something attached to the number.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can do that. Sure. And then your format, which we'll talk about. The form that I shared with you is more from a SMART form. SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So we'll talk about that a little bit when you start getting more into the nitty gritty. And then of course your reporting process, and what are you going to do from here on as far as reporting your goals. So let's start out with because what we need to do is take all the people's priorities and see what's common, and then come to consensus on the number of goals and what priority areas that you have. So if each of you were to select 2 priority areas that you feel is most important for you to focus on in the short term, what would those 2 areas be? Now, just spend a little time and think about it individually, because then what I want to do is have you share them collectively to see where we have our commonalities, so that we can begin the discussion around goals. Does that sound reasonable?
That works.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So just take a little time to think of 2 priorities that you feel come with high urgency. People ready to start? Is Michelle attending tonight, Kyle, or not?
I am here. I just couldn't get unmuted before.
Oh, okay. Do you have a way of just documenting the two things that everyone says?
Yes.
Can you do that for us, please? All right.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. So I'm just going to call on random people then. So John, would you like to start, please? What are your two priority areas?
Oh, you took my last comment seriously, didn't you? So that I can't. I have no excuse this time. That's okay.
All accommodate.
That's okay. That's okay. Okay. I actually had 4 of them, but I'm gonna probably 3 really, but I'll narrow it down to 2. One that I would say is I would like to see us explore ALE options, and this is a long process, so this is not something that would be a goal that we'd be looking to accomplish, but I think that the exploration of it is I think highly necessary. I don't think that we've talked about it over the last year and a half or so, but we haven't gone much further than that. And I think that we have to try really hard to look at options on that. And then I think the other ones are all important, but two tie together. I'm going to say early childhood literacy. We need to have a continued focus on that. I think we've had a good focus. We need to laser focus on it, I think, more, but that kind of falls into academic achievement, which I think probably other people would be responding to as well. So
sure. Excellent. Thank you, John.
Sure.
Kyle.
So mine are a little bit shorter, like a shorter focus than John's. My two biggest things right now, if I'm thinking about until October, is the reentry plan, and then communication and execution of that plan. You know, we're going to have hiccups, there are going to be bumps in the road, but we really have to make sure everything is crystal clear and that we execute it as best as possible.
Excellent. Have you sent a parent survey or anything yet to parents about starting school in the fall? So you have some of that started.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Maria.
So mine are, I would like to see a more diverse composition of our staff that can mirror what our community looks like. For me, that's top priority. Another one is mental health priority, as far as having the right resources for students that have special needs, not necessarily, just disability, but really focusing on what their mental status is so they can perform better in their classes. And I'm just going to add a third one that I think is very important too, that maybe would be more like a short-term goal, I hope, but discipline. We really need to focus on what our process to have a more equitable process of disciplining our students. So those are my top 3.
Great, thank you. Let's go with Monica.
Yes, thank you. My 2 goals are looking at a suggestion, the start and the opening of the 2020-2021 school year, which is approaching September. Making sure that safety and security of our staff, students, and opportunities for learning. And then I would have to, I'm going to sound a little like Kyle, the communication and execution of that plan successfully being done.
Thank you, Monica. Megan?
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm also trimming down a longer list here. For me, looking at the reentry plan, regardless of what it ends up being, I feel like Beloit has been a bit lacking in our virtual learning options anyway. So as a short-term goal, I would like to see sort of a robust virtual learning option that focuses through the lens of both equity and accessibility. So I'm trying to, I guess that's my more broad brush way of addressing some smaller stuff. Some of it's already been mentioned. And my second on my list was behavior intervention, which I just want to signal back to what Maria said. Behavior intervention to me would include preventative and in response of mental health access, hopefully utilizing telehealth through our community partners and things like that. So I would say virtual learning, behavior intervention, that's encompassing of preventative measures as well. And I'm going to sneak a third one in because we're going through such a unique situation. And it was also, I think, a bit overdue from last year. I'd really like to see at least a plan brought forward for pay equity to retain and to reward and retain our teachers for all of the above and beyond really fantastic work that they've been doing, and putting them in such an exceptional situation. I think it would be a good gesture to bring forward a plan for pay equity for all employee groups.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Peggy?
All right, I have two short-term goals. The first is the implementation of an instructional plan that includes assessment and that ongoing progress monitoring, where we're looking at student data through the PLC process. And then the second is that accompanying PD plan that really supports the teachers in the carrying out of that plan, and also has professional or just learning opportunities, those helps for families to access the learning, whether we're face-to-face or in a virtual environment.
Great, thank you. So far I haven't heard too much duplication, so we've got a task on our hands. Amy, how about you?
Sure. My two, the first one in the short term is I would like for the board to host a workshop where we evaluate the process for 504s, IEPs, and building transfers, and also our discipline process, which includes referrals, ISS, OSS, and expulsion. And I definitely want to hear from staff and parents to make sure that our process is equitable across buildings and is not biased in any way and is very consistent. So that's my first short-term goal. My second is I would like to see the formation of an ad hoc committee to develop an excellence program that would be targeted at our lowest academic performers. So whoever is identified in that spot as a group, I would really like to see an excellence program focused on those learners that would include things like specialized tutoring, targeting partnering with their parent or guardian, etc., providing the supports that those students need to be successful.
Great, thank you.
May I clarify?
Sure.
I had an evaluation process for 504s, IEPs,
and building transfers,
and then ISS and OSS.
Yeah, and so that was the first point, and then the second point was the discipline process, including referrals.
Thank you. You can keep going, Amy. That was the one I was missing.
Oh, okay, no problem. Referrals, ISS, OSS, and expulsions.
Thank you.
Great. Melissa.
That's me. Okay, so I feel like we're getting to a point where we'll be a little bit repetitive. So I do, obviously, my number one goal is the reopening of buildings and how that's going to look for not only our general, population of students, but I have a little bit more focus on our students who are at risk. Not only our students who have significant health needs, but our students who have behavioral needs as well, who this will be very difficult for. I also have, I might go into maybe three. I have concerns about the professional development plans that we will be providing for staff in regards to our new health and safety processes, safety, and just mental health in general, how we're going to do that. And then let me look at my notes. I agree a lot with the disproportionality. I'd like to focus on that as well with the suspension, expulsion, and over-identification of students of color and disproportionality.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Spencer.
So the biggest thing for me would be our plan for the start of the school year. As many people have mentioned already, just because we had a lot of questions we have to ask ourselves before we make a plan. So there's a lot of things that are coming and changing as every day goes by. The second thing I'd also like to add to it is that, like Megan said, I would like to have some kind of plan for pay equity for teachers, because we have to do something to reward those people that are working very hard in our district, working with those students every single day.
Excellent, thank you.
And I apologize, Spencer, can you repeat your first one? I was still typing Melissa's.
I'm just completely blanking on what I said. The reentry plan.
Reentry plan,
Yeah, so working on a reentry plan for this fall.
Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody had an opportunity to share their priority areas. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, Dan, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, there's my to-do list for.
Yes.
No, I agree with a lot of the pieces in there, but when I think about things that I had on my list that have not been talked about yet, so obviously the reopening plan, but two things that I have that have not been said. Community engagement is both one wholesale, but also as beginnings of a strategic planning process. And then for me, climate, culture, and transparency. Assessing, understanding our strengths, our missed opportunities, and then kind of more nuanced than the communication piece, but how do we rebuild that trust so that people feel like there's transparency in our system, both within and within our district and across our district and community.
Great, thanks, Dan. I think I missed two people. Stephanie? Is Stephanie there?
Yeah, thank you. The reentry plan is big on my list, whatever that looks like. I'm very concerned about during the lockdown and schools being closed, what's happened, and Missy mentioned some of the kids, the kids with behavioral issues. I mean, there's unfortunately a number of kids. Our littlest babies that learn mostly by hands-on, and the ones that, of course, don't even know how to read, and we're out of the buildings, and are at-risk kids. I could go on. There's just a number of students I'm really concerned about. So that reentry plan, we've got to really be thorough on implementing that. And the other concern is the discipline, and that's been mentioned as well. And on the upside, I don't think that that will be a huge obstacle. Obstacle's not the right word. It won't. I think that if we approach it in the right manner, I think that that's something that we can get done in the short term quite easily, as long as we have structures in place and a clear understanding of how that's going to be carried out in the buildings by administration and staff.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. And Joanne.
Hi. So I would say a lot of my immediate short-term focus is our reentry plan and how transportation, facilities, staff, student, all of that is in that mix. And then because it's in that short-term time frame, budget is a huge part of what is the financial implications of COVID and the effects it has on our district. So those are my top priorities as far as what I've identified that need immediate attention in the short term. I would like to say a lot of these, as far as pay equity, that would fall into my budget considerations. The diverse staff, many of these concerns are things that I think we definitely need to address and get those, but trying to look at the short-term side is where I've prioritized my areas.
Excellent. Now, did everybody have a chance? The list is longer on my side, so I apologize if I was premature in going to the next level. So we've got all kinds of ideas on here, and everybody has really done a lot of great thinking around what's important for schools in general. So if we're looking at one from now until September, October, one of the things that I heard from several of you is the reentry plan. So if we're looking at some short-term goals and specific areas, would you agree that one area would be your reentry plan or your start of school or transitioning into the 2021 school year? Would you say that that's one of your priorities right now? I mean, several people have mentioned that.
Can I put in something there? I would obviously agree with that, but I'm curious what the rest of the board thinks about having a reentry plan and making sure that we can respond to the community about what we've done for equity and accessibility in that plan.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, and feel free at any point in time to let's have a discussion. So, board, did you hear Megan's question?
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I know they're working on putting the plan together, but making sure that we communicate it well and we're upfront with, you know, if it is face-to-face or some sort of combination, what safety precautions are going to be had, really just communicate as much as we can about all of the angles.
Okay.
I have a question for clarity. Since I know Dan and his team are have been working on a reentry plan to present on the 28th, is that something that we're going to work on or talk about tonight? Are we going to wait until the plan is presented and then offer feedback or suggestions then? Like structurally, how will the issue of reentry be handled tonight?
Is that a question for me? Because
for whoever is able to answer, I'm not.
Okay, yeah, I'm not able to answer that question.
Louise, I'm wondering, and I agree with Amy, like, is that the conversation we want to have with, because we're currently working on that, and I'm soliciting feedback, and I've sent email to board members to start to get their input, but yes, I have the same question that Amy has, is when we think about setting short-term goals, are we wanting to identify the nuances within that, or is it that we want to set just a large-term goal around the reopening or a specific portion of the reopening?
So when I picture that as one of our short-term goals, the goal is around reentry. And so one of the action steps would be we approve the reentry plan July 28th. Mm-hmm. So our goal is, and we'll make it could be a beautifully worded goal, but then, with the different action steps. So action step would be we approve it on July 28th. And then another action step would could be on July 29th, we start communicating that to families. And this is how we're going to communicate that out to family. We're going to do this.
Okay.
So that's how I envision that working in tonight's discussion.
Just for clarification, I was envisioning that the plan will be presented to us on the 28th, and then that's the starting point for discussion, for collaboration. I would envision like a community listening session, if not more than one, to garner input. I know a survey has already been done, but it wasn't my expectation that we would be approving a reentry plan on the 28th. Yeah, that wasn't my expectation.
So the plan that I'm working on is that we will have, for the 28th, a model for reentry, or for what the fall would look like, with an expectation that it's an action item that the board approve that model. You are correct, Amy, that we will have a portion of the plan worked out. There is work being done in preparation for that, but from that point moving forward, once we have a model and we can start to build it out, you're absolutely right. There has to be more people around the table to get moving forward on that. So the plan actually is going to be something that gets built from the 28th moving forward. What the approval would be is the administration's approach for building that plan. So that's the action piece for July 28th.
And again, just to clarify, is there going to be one model presented on the 28th, or is there like 2 or 3 scenarios, and then we say this is the direction we want you to pursue, and then get input from other entities to build this out? Or is it, here is the plan, approve or not approve?
Right, and I think the language is very, very important, that in terms of how we're approaching it. So the plan, well, there will actually be 2 phases in the plan. There will be a plan that's for our staff, but then there has to be that communication of that plan in family-friendly language that explains to the families what does this plan entail, and for more specifically for families, what are the decision factors that they need to do. What we would bring as a model, we would be bringing a model that will have different components to it, and the board would have the ability to help structure with the discussion, ultimate approval. Okay, we agree or disagree with the model, or we agree with the model and we're saying that this is the starting point that administration should take moving forward. So within that, there will be different scenarios. Our current working isn't to bring a model that has only one option within it, because we know that if anything we've learned over the past couple of months, it's a very fluid situation, and 3 weeks is a lifetime. So that's our current thinking and plan, is that we'll have one model. That model will have various components of being in buildings, not being in buildings, and then I envision the board to ask us good questions, have dialogue amongst themselves, and then ultimately make a decision on wholesale the model, and then within that, their direction as far as where we would be a starting point within that model. From there, then we can build in all of the nuances, because it's going to be contextualized from a district standpoint down to the building, because each building is going to be different. And so how that model gets built out into a more formalized plan is going to require a whole lot more more conversations that need to occur at the building level and with more people around the table.
Dan, Maria has a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan. Can you explain to us, you guys have built this model. Can you explain to us where the input has come from? Like, where have you gone input to create this model? Because I'm assuming you have taken a lot of information and probably a lot of advice and probably, from the surveys from, different sources. Can you give us a little, explanation as far as where has all that come from?
Certainly. So the information has come from the prior surveys that have happened before coming into this role. The Rock County survey, which I'll be presenting information tomorrow night, the staff surveys that have happened before, as well as the ones I'll be presenting, the Rock County superintendent's conversations, the guidance that has been sent out from DPI, the resources that have been shared amongst staff in the district, as well as the Rock County superintendents. All of those have helped formulate. And when I think about the model, we're talking about the wholesale structure. So when you think about the three pieces that DPI had talked about, they talked about only being in a virtual setting or only being in a 5-day face-to-face setting. And then hybrid really speaks to every gamut in between those two pieces. We're taking that and narrowing it down and saying, given the constraints and resources that govern us here in Beloit, what does that look like from a continuum of what criteria do we need to meet and satisfy in order for us to safely bring staff and students together in the building? And then what criterion and decision-making process do we need to have to determine whether that's a viable option as far as an action or the alternative? I can say at this point around the feedback, having a virtual learning option that was mentioned as we're going through our priorities is something that needs to be built out and would be an option across the board. But what does it look like for the families that don't choose virtual option between safely having instruction in the building and then distance learning where we're not in the building? And so that the model is going to delineate what does that look like here. That's what I plan to bring before the board to have discussions on and then get approval for the next action steps after that. From that point, then we can start to build out the details of what does that look like at each of our levels and more specifically for each of our buildings. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Just one last question. How much percentage have you gone as far as like community engagement to come up with this model?
So I've really relied heavily on the comments and feedback from the surveys. I've met with the Tim Vedra from BEA to start bringing him in on the conversations. So when I had an opportunity to introduce myself at the NAACP, I've taken the opportunities like that to articulate questions to the community and say, please share this question and my email, and please send me feedback. I've received one email from directly from that evening, and I've received some other emails, whether they are from staff who had heard that in the community and are sending me information, or their staff that are just naturally reaching out. I have not determined that yet, but that's where I am at this particular point.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep.
And so now, so what we can do is we can, if the plan is a goal that people want to work on, then is, our goal is to create the plan and execute the plan, but then the action steps. So what are the action steps underneath it? What are those timelines that a plan needs to be finalized, that it needs to be communicated to families?
That's the thought I had, Kyle, is obviously I think it's really important. You can set it as a goal or a strategic plan, strategic goal. And then after Dan has an opportunity to present his information to the board, you would be able to fill in a little more detail about the action steps and really itemize who's responsible, what time, and who's going to come back to the board and how often and that type of thing to do a report. I'm wondering if you have the action plan process form in front of you. Does everybody have that? Because if you have that, Dan, maybe because a lot of this is coming and you have the background of the model, looking at this form, is there a way to start maybe drafting out a SMART goal from the plan or 2 SMART goals that you can, and then complete this form so that it would be a second check on accountability?
Mm-hmm. So I think from the conversation we just had, one of the very first SMART goals would be to by the end of July to have communicated and gained approval of a model for the fall, the 2020-2021 school year, with direction and guidance from the Board of Education. The second one would then be to bring back to the board in the month of August updates on the planning process for that, to be communicated both to the district staff as well as to the community, leveraging our different avenues of communication. So our website, our messenger, emails, and so forth. So those are just 2 that I have off the top of my head that could craft into SMART goals.
The other thoughts I had based on some of the importance of what all of you have said is I've heard a lot on behavior and discipline. So, there could be, as part of your plan, what are some of those behavior discipline things that you're going to cover? Or there was the IEP or the instructional plan. I think there's a way of starting some of this work, because some of these things that are priorities, and they're all just really great things that you all thought of, they will definitely feed into a longer term plan. So what I'm trying to focus this on is, if we looked at the plan that Dan has, and you mentioned one SMART goal by, after approval of you will have this model adopted and then communicated. You could even write action steps. How are you going to communicate this?
Mm-hmm.
And that communication step by step, what modalities you can use, who's going to, and that type of thing. So you really kind of break it down so that everybody around this table, and then also your parents, are very familiar with the step by step, because the more they know, the less confused it's going to be for everybody, and then you just start to build that trust with them.
Mm-hmm.
Equity, I think, is another big one, because if you're talking about a reentry plan and you're talking maybe a hybrid with virtual, what's your family status as far as technology, the internet exposure and all those types of things that they would need, or special needs, or mental health, I heard. I mean, so these are all things that are extremely important as you are bringing this new entry plan into play. But I think right now it seems really big, and what we want to do is try to get it in, in language that is small steps, small action steps.
I absolutely agree with you. I guess one thing that's wondering in my mind is, so I felt like we're talking about different themes across each of our priority areas, and so I absolutely agree the reopening. So are you wanting us to have one goal and then start building the action steps tonight around that, or are you wanting to know what our general themes are and then start building action steps under that? Because when you were saying discipline, I wasn't sure if you were talking about that as a second possible goal and equity as a third possible goal, or
I think
were you thinking of those underneath the reopening plan?
Well, since they are a priority, I think it might be a good idea to have them as separate, because you're just so you pay attention to them, as a separate focus.
Right, because when I think about when I'm thinking about it in my head, I'm thinking, okay, reopening plan. There's a lot of action steps underneath that.
Yes.
There's the model. There's the communication. There's the teaming structure of what's the cross-functional team look like at the district level? What's the cross-functional team that buildings have at their level? Those are the conversations that we're engaged in right now.
Yeah.
Thinking about it almost in terms of not even a 100-day structure, like a 10-day structure.
Yep.
And so forth. So that's why I want to ask the clarification, because I agree with one thing about our board is certainly wanting to be clear and detailed, but I wasn't quite sure exactly when you brought in discipline and equity. Were you thinking of that underneath the reopening plan, or were you thinking of those as two other board short-term goals and dealing with that?
I would see them as other, unless, anybody who has an opinion on this, please speak up.
So can I clarify? Because Megan did have a question about accountability pieces for equity and access for our reentry plan. So rather than putting that under the reentry plan, it would be under equity, but there would be some sort of then. So one of the action steps would be to somehow conduct an audit of equity and accessibility of a reentry plan, or some sort of a mix. So even though that relates to the reentry plan, it would still be under equity, because that's so they would all intertwine.
They would, Kyle. They would intertwine. And the other thing about it is, knowing that you're going to go on and develop more longer-term goals, you get a start and a focus on this equity as you are transitioning into the school year, but it opens the door for more specific equity work.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
That's how I would see it. Now, you're not going to have your whole equity process or your whole discipline plan redone by September. However, from what I'm hearing, that's an area of focus that can go into maybe a long-term strategic planning process for long-term goals.
Okay.
Can I just clarify on that? And thanks everybody for your patience here. So we are going into this though with an understanding of what kind of our metrics are and what our expectations are for how we ensure we're putting in a good faith effort to be equitable and accessible for all of our different students, particularly given the sort of extraordinary situation here of reopening.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're not going to fix it all right now, but we are going in with here's a set of criteria that we're going to use to evaluate ourselves and ensure that this plan has everything that it takes to meet the needs of a diverse group of learners and provide accessibility for those learners, going into it.
See, now, what you just said, Megan, would be a great strategic goal. And under that, for your short term, you could say by September, we will have an equity committee that will, I'm just trying to think of something more specific, a SMART goal that you could put under that you could start this work toward your equity
right.
focus. Right. So I would be comfortable because I feel like prior to rolling it out, we have to have this is what an equitable and accessible reentry plan looks like. And I get that that's not the end all be all. I agree with you, Ms. Blankenheim, about having them maybe an advisory or some other some oversight then as things come up, and just some continuity to ensure that that set of criteria is met, or if it needs to evolve, just kind of that oversight process. But I feel very strongly that we need to have absolutely, this is what equity and access looks like for a reopening plan, because I don't want us to start with any kids starting behind.
I agree. Great. Does that help you, Dan?
Yes. I mean, the idea, and I think these are also conversations that we've been talking about in terms of things that have kind of perhaps existed at one point in time in the past and need to come back. I definitely think when we think about the model for reopening, that's why I was saying within that one thing, there's multiple threads within that, and making sure that we are addressing all those pieces. But wholesale, short-term planning around equity, I think that's a overarching piece that dovetails not only reentry plan, but a lot of the other priorities that people have talked about.
Yes.
So having an equity, so I see equity as a strategic goal, and then under that, action steps about an equity committee, and to what Megan had said in terms of a place to vet other things like the reopening model, and then subsequent plan through that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would just like to offer this. The reentry plan is so important, and all of this discussion is valuable. My concern is that since we're scheduled from 5 to 8, it's challenging for me to come up with who's responsible for what and action items and how we can build that accountability piece, since the plan has not been rolled out. And I'm wondering if it may be a good use of our time to put that on hold until we have the plan to explore and to sort through, and to address the other items that are on our short-term goal in our remaining 2 hours.
Anybody have feedback for Amy on that?
I would agree. I would agree with that as well. I mean, that's what we have the administrative team for, and let them do the work, let them come back, present it to us instead of us getting deeper in the weeds. So I understand we're respectful for what's being brought up, but let's make sure we're using good use of our time for what we should be doing tonight.
I agree as well.
Works for me.
Sounds good.
Okay, so then we will shift gears to other priority areas for the short term. We have is behavior or mental health, discipline, special education, diversity. We have a equity plan. Is an equity plan something that's priority? Pay plan, I mean, is that a priority from now until September?
I would respectfully disagree with that.
That is not one for till September?
Where, Megan, you were referring to pay, equity and pay for teachers, correct?
I was referring, I don't think we're going to solve that problem by September. I would like to make it to the top of somebody's priority list that this academic year, as early as is possible, we work with the BEA and other necessary employee groups to lay out a plan that addresses longevity pay and other pay equity issues that will help us retain our educators. I don't think that's going to get done by September, but I feel strongly, especially just we had some issues with that last year, and I just think it's more important now than ever to retain our educators. And I think that a gesture for us to do that would be to, at the top of the priority list somewhere, there's got to be a pay longevity and pay equity plan.
Stephanie, you wanted to say something?
Oh, yes, I was trying to follow Kyle's rules. Well, it's Robert's rules, not Kyle's rules. But yeah, I do. And I agree with everything Megan said. As far as I'm thinking, discipline could be a short-term goal. Tomorrow night, we're going to, I think that's one that's very doable. And I think that's one that's very necessary to have in place before school starts, because I'm assuming that there will be some kids in the buildings. And I think it's critical. We've talked about this for years and years and years, and I think we need to do some action on it. And I personally understand the code very well, and I understand the processes that would need to be put in place. So I think that is something that we could tackle before the kids get into the buildings.
So I'm hearing discipline as an area of focus right now. Okay, so that's one. Is there another one?
I have a question for Dan. Dan, you had mentioned, and I just want clarification on this. You said climate, culture, and transparency is one of yours. Can you elaborate a little bit further on that?
Certainly. So knowing that recent history in the district has been a lot of turnover, seeing administrators and staff, particularly our Black administrators and educators leaving the district. So getting, for me, a sense of where we are as a district. And then also been hearing a lot of feedback in individual meetings around, it feels like information's being shared, but decisions seem to be contrary to that. So there seems to be a lack of transparency in our decision-making process or in how we're communicating decisions. And so when I think about climate, culture, and transparency, it's I guess a overarching piece would be trust building. But to me, trust building really speaks to those three pieces based on my couple of weeks here in the district.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Yep. When I look at what people have written down, I definitely see discipline as being something that is work being done and things that can be done in the short term as we think about with our administrators, and then setting expectations around school and expectations for our staff, expectations for our students. the other one, I think we talked about that kind of is all about this, and would throw out there for consideration is equity. Because I think that touches on the conversations around disproportionality, staff diversity, health and safety. I think within those there's conversations within that. So I just throw that out there as a comment.
So would it be, so Dan, if I'm understanding what you're saying, is if you had help from the board and the support from the board for some short-term goals right now, one of them would be related to discipline and the other one related to equity.
In addition to our reopening
Reentry.
work. Yep.
But we're not going to set a goal on the reopening because you have that and
Right.
you'll set up that whole thing. But to complement that report, we could get started on some SMART goal process toward a discipline program or process, which could cover what I heard a lot about: equitable discipline. I heard expulsion. I heard any behavior intervention.
Yep.
Maybe even mental health resources. All of those things could fit under possibly the discipline part or the equity part.
Yep.
So you might have two strategic areas, but you're going to have several action steps underneath all those.
Mm-hmm.
This is Peg. If I could maybe
Peggy,
throw something out for consideration that kind of applies to both of these areas. As we work with building principals and leadership teams this summer, we're working through an equitable school improvement plan process and identifying not only their academic goals, but also that kind of learning environment, which is closely tied to behavior and supports for students. I'm wondering if, the sharing out of that information, we'd see evidence of that work within the school improvement plans and the professional development that'll be happening at that level as well.
Well, that sure sounds like it's what's needed as far as the equity piece. So Peggy, are you saying that is already in place? So it's not a short-term goal that we'd have right now?
Well, the short term from now through August is working with those building leadership teams so that they're ready to share that work out at the building level to kick off the school year, but then it'll be carry us throughout the entire year of monitoring those goals, making adjustments to those plans. So there would be multiple touch points along the way that we can, the beginning of the year checkpoints, the mid-year report out to the board, end of year progress.
May I comment?
Yes.
So if I need a point of order given to me, somebody feel free to jump in. Here's my concern. I think as a district, we're lacking in following PBIS, or if you choose something else to follow, we are not following it across the district. That's what makes it very difficult when expulsions come to the board, because we're seeing packets that are not prepared fully. I'm not seeing behavior interventions. This all starts with having something in place across the district that is clear and concise and communicated throughout the year to students, to parents, and to staff, and that the building leaders are following consistently. That's what I think we're lacking right now. That's my opinion. And again, if I need a point of order on that, board members, jump right on in.
Well, I would just piggyback off of that and just say that we have such a good literacy intervention RTI model. I would just like to see something similar for behavior intervention with RTI, and I think that we've got administration who've already reported to us that they've already done an outstanding job this past year, kind of like building that foundation, and that we're missing some pieces to that. So I would love to hear from administration how we can support kind of a tiered behavior intervention system to support behavior and discipline as a goal.
And Megan, and please forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know. If PBIS,
we lost her.
Oh, sorry. PBIS already has all those behavior interventions in place if it's being followed efficiently and effectively, and it's being taught, and the talk is being walked in each building across the district. That's what I have seen lacking, and that's one of our big issues with discipline. There's no consistency, and I don't know right now that we even have PBIS in all of our buildings. Do we, Peggy?
Yes, we do have PBIS in all of our buildings.
And are those lessons being taught daily?
They have, especially at the beginning of the school year, at different points through the year is more intensive than others. There are weekly lessons that are taught, as well as second steps, so it's kind of all plotted out.
Perfect. And then they have, and then when there's behavior issues, then those kids go to the SIT, right? And that's where the behavior interventions come in, correct?
They would problem solve at the PLC, the grade level or group level PLCs prior to taking them to SIT, because you want to do some classroom tier 1 interventions and, progress monitor those, so that when you do take a student to SIT, you can say, I've tried X, Y, and Z, here are my results. And then you'd have that problem solving at the SIT level.
How often do the PLCs meet?
They've been meeting weekly.
Okay, thank you.
Peg, may I ask a question? Are we making room then for, like, whether it's through telehealth or just the existing resources we have? I'm just curious, could you just speak to how mental health plays into this and just supports for students?
I'm going to pass that one over to Missy.
Yeah, I was going to say Missy should jump in.
So are you talking about, like, currently with, like, distance learning, how that's working?
I guess I'm just curious because, like, I know, like, community health does, like, telehealth supports for students, and I'm just curious, like, in any potential, like, behavior and discipline short-term goal, like, I guess I'm curious from your perspective, where do you see areas that we could strengthen those resources for students, and how can the board support that?
So what I really think is that there is a disconnect in how we are connecting with community resources and what people understand. Like, we have a great outreach to our community resources. Our social workers do a great job in making that like the triangular of school, family, community, resource, and kind of triangulating that. It's difficult in our current state. I'll be honest with you, but we do have a process in place, like Peg said. Like, there's a tiered system in place for students getting resources. So it's it goes through the SIT process, and the SIT process refers them to our mental health resources. Not saying that students don't go through that process and get the resources that they need. We have supports and services in place for any student that needs them. So I guess I need a little bit more direction in what you're looking for.
I just want to make sure, no, that all sounds awesome. I guess I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about, like, we're talking about behavior and discipline, and I guess just like wanting to make sure we touch all the bases. We talked about mental health. We talked about, we've already heard about like IEPs. We've heard about like PBIS. I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to talk about like what's going well, and if there are areas that you need our support in, whether it's through like purchasing curriculum or FTE or whatever. I'm just curious what you feel like you need. I know like there's a lot of really great stuff happening already, and I'm just curious, and that framework of it being a short-term goal just kind of put stuff on our radar so we know kind of what to support for you and what to go to bat for, so we can make it the best for all our kids.
Well, I can give you're going to always hear from me. It's FTE. I mean, like I'm not going to disclose or not be transparent that it's always, we need more mental health services, especially coming back from COVID. We're going to need that. Do you know what I mean? But we have a very strong team that supports the community and the family in regards to what they need, in my opinion. So, I mean, I that's where I'm at with that, I guess.
No, and that's awesome. Thank you, because I think that the board needs to hear that, because we need to know. It's great for us to. I mean, we could talk all night about the vision that we want to have for our kids and like what we want to do, but we need to know like the nuts and bolts of how we're going to make these things happen. So I appreciate you speaking to that. That's really helpful.
And the biggest, like we have to keep in mind that social workers are 50% reimbursable. So like in looking at where we need supports, there are school, family, community triangulation. And so when we look at where the needs are in buildings, looking at supporting them with social workers is the best bang for the buck when we're looking at being fiscally responsive.
And I love this discussion. And in my mind, we take that then as, if Missy says that FTE is something we need, then one of our action steps is to explore the best deployment or investigate an increase of FTE,
right.
and then have have a completion date, because then as we budget for the following school year, then maybe say, hey, we know it's going to cost us this much money. This is where they would best fit. So then, we can put them there. So that we can act on,
It would help me if we can move towards like a tangible project, so we can fill out that action plan process and get our start date and who's responsible and time frame. I would like to get feedback on my idea about having a workshop, again, that would focus on our evaluation process for 504s, IEPs, building transfers. One thing that I would like to include with that is I think it's critically important for all of our staff to have unconscious bias training and also training with microaggressions, so we can really unpack who we are sending for 504s, IEPs, building transfers, referrals, etc., and the reasons behind sending those particular students. So if I could give, and this is something that we could do in the short term, we could have this workshop where we examine our process, we find out where our flaws are, and we have action steps to move this forward to make sure that we are consistent with our discipline and the other things that I've listed, and that we are equitable to all of our students. And this is something that could happen in the next month.
Well, I was going to transition into this discussion onto that process form to see if this would make sense to you. But one of my thought, and I just jotted down some notes, that one of your areas of focus for your goal would be behavior and discipline. And I think your strategic goal in the long term is you're going to want to have a robust behavior intervention program that is taught with fidelity, or something like that. So that's your strategic goal, which is you're going to start now and go into your long term. So your SMART goal would be, and one of the SMART goals then would be that you are going to develop fidelity. By the end of 2020-21, all teachers will be trained and using PBIS. Some of those measurable things, so that the board could know that yes, each building is consistently doing PBIS with fidelity. And so you have this process then that's the short term, but then moves into the long term. Your committee, Amy, that would be a good short-term goal for the equity and diversity strategic area.
Can I just jump in real quick? Well, I was just going to say, with all of these things, though, we should have not just equity as part of all of these as metrics. We also, I just feel like we need to have, like, I loved what Amy said about anti-bias. We need to have like anti-bias components and like initially and like ongoing through each and every one of these goals. Because there's going to be like, I know it's like probably not going to make it into our short-term goals, but there's like HR things where we need it. It's not like, I feel like it's not even enough to talk about equity. We need to talk about anti-bias. We can do exactly what Amy said and create that space to be reflective and to diagnose issues and to have that ongoing oversight.
That's kind of where my mind was going to. So when I think about behavior and discipline, so some of the action pieces is informing the board on our process for 504s, IEPs, expulsions, behavior referrals, interventions, and all that. And so that could be a workshop. Or it could be informational items that come before the board. So I think, from the board's perspective, if it want to have a workshop approach to it, or if there are some pieces that the board wants updates on in terms of calendaring out presentations that we bring to the board. So I could see one month we bring Missy and her team and talk about 504s, IEPs, and so forth, and then be able to have the board engage in that discussion. Another time coming back and talking about behavior interventions and so forth. So yes, I absolutely agree. And then within that, we can certainly talk about like, what are those components or the wonderings that the board has? So then I and the cabinet can say, okay, what is our PD around anti-bias, anti-racism training that filters into these particular pieces?
Dan, I know that you're new.
Yep.
And again, I'm just going on past practice that I'm familiar with. Starting at the very core with getting back to PBIS again, building leaders had time in the summer that they met with a core group of teachers who volunteered. They had ownership into that process because the teachers and the principal from the building came up with the rules for PBIS that they would follow. It doesn't take a whole year to teach this. If that's done this summer yet, if there's funds available, which there should be after July 1st, if I'm, Joanne, remembering all this correctly, then this could be done in 2 or 3 days at individual buildings. That team then in the fall introduces it before the kids come to the staff, and they start the first 2 or 3 days, well, at least the first or 2 days of school, going through those PBIS rules with the children, and they have the whole staff participate in training them. If we do that, this is going to, I know it works. This will take care of our discipline issues to a large degree. It's an extremely, I can't reiterate that enough. It's an extremely important first step that needs to be taken, but it has to be done with fidelity, and it has to be done at every building level if we're going to achieve equity.
So are we going to pull up that SMART document and start filling it in?
I would say yes, and I would also add to what Stephanie said. PBIS sounds great. If we're doing that in all our buildings, fantastic. But to do PBIS without unconscious bias training and microaggressions training, what is the word I'm looking for? Is irresponsible. Clear example. I worked part-time for the district for years, and so sometimes I would sub. I can't tell you the number of time in sub plans, it would say student X, Y, and Z will probably be a problem. 9 times out of 10, those were Black and brown children. We need to look at our unconscious bias. We need to look at microaggressions in tandem with PBIS. We also need a workshop. We need to look at what exactly the system currently is or should be for referrals for IEPs, 504s, building transfers. Example, and someone from administration, jump in if I have this wrong. In order to be transferred to a different building, you need to have 2 risk factors. Our district is about 78% impoverished. Okay, 2 of the risk factors among the list are a student that is truant, a student that is more than 2 grades behind. Well, if you're a student who's in poverty, who's eligible for McKinney-Vento services, you could have those 2 right off the bat. If you're a SAPAR student, if you have multiple discipline issues, anyone who falls into that bucket can be transferred. Are we looking at our unconscious bias, our microaggressions when we're making those decisions? To leave that out is irresponsible.
And I think that those would be good action steps for you to put underneath the behavior and discipline plan, our goals.
My understanding was that the school district was already working with, is it Mark Perry? On doing training. Am I correct on that? Can someone speak up to that?
Yes. So as part of the Equitable School Improvement Planning process, Mark is going to be working with our building leadership teams, providing training on implicit bias and microaggressions. And then as the teams roll that out at the school level in the fall, the plan is that all staff members will get that initial training as well. But then we need to go deeper than that, just like PBIS and all these other systems that we're talking about. It's that ongoing professional development and support that we provide for staff, and not doing the one and done that really will make an impact.
I have to say, it sounds like you are all doing a lot of great things. It's just that maybe not everybody has all the information about everything that's already going on. So I think that there's some, good ways of providing reports and data around a lot of these things that are already being done. And it should be just part of your action steps, that these would be periodically reported to the board. You're training on intentional bias, or you're training on PBIS and that type of thing. And I'm sure you provide data to the board already about expulsions and disproportionality and that type of thing. So do we want to tackle the action plan form and see what this might look like? And I think Michelle do you have the form? Is Michelle, can you just kind of make some notes for us?
Sure, I do, and I've started making some, but go ahead.
Can you tell us what you have already on the form?
On the form where you've been talking about PBIS and the IEPs, 504s, referrals, etc.
Yeah.
I just kind of just listed those across the top for the strategic goal, just so I knew where I was taking the notes. But then I under the action steps for the steps to achieve the strategy, I put in the first box implicit bias and microaggression training. And then in the second box, I put workshop on processes for IEPs, 504s, referrals, just trying to kind of try to follow the conversations and what people were thinking. So and then under the SMART goal, you had started, I think, Louise, to say something about by 2021, all teachers will be trained in PBIS or something along that line. So like I said, they're just notes. I wasn't really formulating anything. I just popping notes in as people were talking. So
that's great.
Is it okay, Michelle, if you share your screen and we kind of iron those out? Is that...
Yeah, I'll just save it quickly and pull it up on my laptop because I was typing that on my other computer, but it'll just take me a second to save it.
That's great.
Before I move on to that, I think Louise just hit on something really important, which is communication. And I just think that whether it's a short-term goal or not, I would like our board, our district, or administration, I would like all of us to be conscientious about how we can improve and streamline our communication, both within our organization and outside, because Louise, you're exactly, we have such amazing things that happen here and they need to be better communicated and people need to feel that they're looped in, because often a complaint that we get from the community is that people don't know what's going on. So whatever we feel like we're doing to communicate, it's just something, it's not getting to where it needs to go always. And it's important to get that out there.
Sounds like a third goal to me, Megan.
Well, I think wouldn't that fall under community engagement? I mean, community engagement and communication.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
But then also once we do communicate those things, we can see, because there are a lot of areas that we need to improve on. And I don't want it to just be like, oh, we're not improving on that, because probably things are happening and we just don't know because of communication, right? You know, so it works both ways.
Sure.
Michelle, thank you for compiling those notes. And could you add a line under that workshop for parent and guardian involvement? I have heard horror stories, and we need to be aware of the harm that has been done so that we can correct it moving forward. So that has to be a part of this.
Sure. Somehow I just messed up my screen on here, but I will get things back. Bear with me one second.
Amy?
Yes.
Can you speak to, just generically, without using names, an example of what you just spoke of?
I could. It would take much longer than the time we have.
Okay.
Yes, I think it would be more appropriate to have a formalized setting and to hear from the people who have been impacted.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
But even just reflect, and I won't name names, of course, but the email that we received about the IEP, the special education situation, just reflect to things like that to get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Almost there. Sorry.
I hope people are taking the needed breaks that they need. If you need to step away, get a drink, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. It's a long time.
Okay. I gotta get my bar to come up for sharing. Nothing is cooperating with me right at the moment. There we go. Come on.
Kyle, this might be a question for you while we're waiting on that. The 12 board goals that we set up, are we going to put action steps with those, deadlines, et cetera, as we continue to work through them?
The board goals have, where applicable, they have a timeline already, or a date of that there's to be completed by. So no, there wasn't, other than reviewing them and making sure that they get on the agendas and then reviewing them, whether or not we accomplish them. I think there was one section, the superintendent search, where we kind of left timelines blank because we were kind of unsure of our status at the time. So we may have taken a look at that piece.
So can you clarify, did you want it within this box but on a separate line, or do you want it as a separate item but before the workshop?
I think the parent guardian input is going to be separate from implicit bias or microaggression training, if that's helpful.
Now that I see this on the screen, I totally disagree with the SMART goal by 2021. All teachers will be trained in PBIS. They should all be trained in it.
It's just a note. Like that was just Michelle taking a note. That's nothing that we've agreed on yet.
Right. Yeah, we need to go through and
okay, I'm getting a little too passionate. Thank you.
No problem.
Stephanie.
We like the passion. Did you get all that, Michelle, or not?
Because I started listening to Stephanie, I missed the end of what I was supposed to be typing for Amy. I know it was parent guardian.
So here is the gist of what I want. Parent guardian input, like those who have been harmed by our current process. We need to hear from them so we know where the fixes need to be moving forward.
So parent and guardian input about the current discipline program. You talking discipline, Amy?
I am talking the evaluation process for 504s and IEPs, building transfers, as well as discipline.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. So if we look at the top, the strategic goal is actually going to be behavior and discipline, correct? Is that how, do we want to say behavior and discipline, or right under the action plan process?
But behavior and discipline is separate from an IEP and a 504.
Right.
I think if we add placements, behavior and discipline, that would be a more accurate descriptor.
To me, I would see the PBIS IEPs 504 under your action steps, because those are specific things you need to do in order to improve them.
But I guess I'm still confused. They're separate things. The special ed is different than discipline.
It's a complete, it's like a branch of, like, so we're disproportionate in discipline and we're disproportionate in identification. So it's a kind of I understand what you guys are saying, Stephanie, for sure. Like, that's an overarching. And then I think what was mentioned was, yes, that's a branch of this. So it would be a kind of an action step.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have that identified as through DPI. So we are working on a root cause analysis and kind of like digging down to how to address that in my area. So it is so this is kind of broad, and that is a little bit more micro, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so, Missy. So you're saying I'm more micro.
I think. I think,
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Micro.
Your strategic goal is something you want your objective for the organization that you want to complete in the long term. So your strategic goal would be, you want a I'm just using robust behavior intervention, a robust behavior intervention program, because by the end, in long term, that's your end result. You want something that's robust and effective, or
so to me that makes that's a tier 3. I mean, like this. I'm sorry, not a tier 3, a universal intervention. And then when you get down to tier 2, it's student services. When you get down to tier 3, it's student services and special education.
Can I ask a question? Would class size play a role in like a universal intervention? Like if we made it a longer term, I know that not by September probably, but if this year we could work on better class size ratios, like 4K through 12, could that be considered a tier 1 universal intervention?
If your class size has currently been an issue, do we know it's an issue?
I think
as far
it's an issue.
With discipline and behavior?
It's definitely an issue.
Absolutely. And I think it has a lot to do with some implicit bias issues as well.
And when we talk about the importance of building relationships, it's so much more difficult for a teacher to build a good relationship with 22 students or 25 students rather than 18, 19.
Absolutely. And that's why when we had the AGR report, I was asking those questions regarding how we were using the money. And I believe it's too late for this fall, but I strongly encourage the board to think about it for the next year, because I would also wager a guess that if we looked at our test scores when we were using the old SAGE/AGR and we had those lower class sizes, our academic scores were also higher. And of course, Kyle, what you just mentioned, you have those relationships with those kids. And if you don't have that relationship with that child, you're not going to get those academic scores.
So can one of our action steps be to study the financial impact of reducing class sizes to 1 to 20, or even is their research, is doing like a meta-analysis of the research out there supporting the smaller class sizes.
Do we have current information on the class sizes, the actual class sizes? I know teachers are going to say that, and I know that some teachers have mentioned that the sizes were very excessive, but I guess, do we actually have factual information about class sizes for all of our schools?
I think in terms of if we were asking as an action item, looking at the impact of class size on our so strategic goal being developing a robust, and fill out that, but the action step is examining our class size as it relates, or as a factor impacting our strategic goal or SMART goal. That would be, then we would bring in what's our current class configuration, maybe what's our historical class configuration under SAGE, and things like that. So then it would be more of a in-depth analysis of that, which then the board would be able to provide some strategic guidance in terms of, okay, so have we explored X avenue or Y avenue? And then we could start to develop more long-term action plans around that. So I think, like Michelle, putting that underneath the workshop as a action item.
Yeah, I like the wording that you used, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
Was it exploring our class size
as it relates to the
strategic goal around behavior, discipline, placement? And I think the long-term goal, I think we need to build that piece out. So really, if our strategic is the long-term goal, our SMART goal may be that in the short term, we calendar these pieces out, because perhaps it might be too narrow of a time frame if we're talking about end of September or October for these, with given all of the pieces that are already in our calendar. So we'll have budgeting and some of these other standing items. We might have to say our short-term goal is that we calendar out all of these pieces to bring before the board, and prioritize, like, what are the ones that we want right away, and then what are the things that we might push off to a little bit later on in the school year.
Could we get some dates down? And specifically, I would like to begin with, when can we have this workshop? I would like for your administrative team to lay out what the process is. And then if we can have people who have experienced this process talk about what that looked like for them. So that will give us an idea of where the gaps are, where we need to focus. And then if we could go back to the implicit bias and microaggression training that it sounds like may already be in the works, what are the dates for that?
Right. I agree. I think when thinking about the priorities, I definitely think from the workshop perspective, and then the parent guardian input, I think those are two that we can act on quicker. And then Peg, I know that you were working with Mark Perry with the principals, and then that's something that we're also looking at from the standpoint of the Administrator Academy in early August. But I have not engaged in the conversation with Mark about that, whether he's available or what the topic would be. And I think this would give us the topic.
So looking at the form, then, if we're looking at implicit bias and the training, then the next step would be the start date. So can we throw out a date that would be reasonable for that? And then who's going to be responsible for this training? Does that come from Peg's department? Because whoever's responsible for this, they've got to do the legwork for it, and then also report the progress to date.
Can we back up a little bit? I don't think we gave Peg time to answer the question. Are you on the calendar for Mark? Is this something that has just been discussed? Where are we with implicit bias and microaggression training?
Mark will be joining us on July 30th and 31st. That's school building administrators and their school leadership teams. That's the initial. He's doing a 3-hour training with that group. Dan mentioned that we don't have the details, and we haven't approached him with that date yet to work with the Admin Academy, which is all building administrators, assistant principals, and then some of our district level team as well. And then the start of school, we're still working out what that August PD calendar looks like. So we've talked to him about it, but we don't have those dates down, but it would be the end of August where that would take place.
Perfect. And I know with PD, sometimes paras and secretaries attend and sometimes they don't, depending on the content. Is this something that would include all of our staff?
This is one that we talked about, that we would like everyone, all of our staffing groups, to be able to attend.
Perfect. Thank you.
Peggy, and I think the training is critical and needed. How are we going to make sure it's embedded throughout the year? How are we going to have how are we going to know that they've been trained, but how do we know that they're going to use it?
Okay, so that'll be twofold. So we want to be able to provide ongoing job embedded professional development, and the way that we're working on our school improvement plans, and that's something we'd like to bring back to the board, kind of to review the process and have principals shared out how we've worked through it, is that there are that we're very intentional about having equity visible in all of our school goals. So in their action plans, in their professional development, they will be tracking that at the building level as well.
Peggy, this is Maria. Have you guys thought of creating like a strategic plan around diversity, inclusion, and equity? Because I know that would probably be even more helpful as well. And I know that you guys used to have like an equity committee. Has that been reestablished again at all? Is there any thought of doing that?
I'm going to turn that back to, I think we talked about the equality committee starting back up. Michelle probably has that in the notes.
So Colin and I have talked about that, and that was something that he had asked me to get restarted. Because it had not met in a while. And so one of the pieces that I have on my to-do list is figure out the last time they met, who was on that group, and then restart that. And I would definitely say that the focus would be based around these, starting with these short-term goals, but then building towards those long-term goals that we would want to establish as part of our strategic planning process.
And Stephanie, to your point, I think what we get to is one piece of how we can get to is this or is this not embedded, is you look at the breakdown of who is being transferred from buildings, who is being sent for ISS, OSS referrals, who is being sent to expulsion, etc. And that's going to be telling. If one or two groups are highlighted consistently, then that's probably a key indicator that there may be something else going on. And that's part of our responsibility to review that data and then respond appropriately. If we could get a workshop date, then like the parents that have reached out to me that I know would be willing to share their experiences, we can get in touch with those people to connect with them to get this going. Does someone have a calendar up? Kyle, you would probably have the best idea of when this could fit in an upcoming meeting space.
It'd probably be a separate meeting, not the second or fourth. So, I mean, it's something that we want to have happen in August.
I would love to have it happen in August, and probably now that I'm thinking about it, the best way to move forward may be with a doodle to check availability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that'd be the best way to move forward.
So Amy, can you clarify what would be covered during the workshop, please?
Sure. The way I would envision it is, what is our current, like on paper, process for how a student is identified for a 504 plan, a IEP, the process for initiating a building transfer, like what triggers that. Also our discipline plan. And I get that it's teacher discretion a lot of times, but what is the standard practice for issuing a referral? Like what things would initiate the issuance of a referral? Sending a student to ISS, sending a student to OSS, sending a student for expulsion, and then what is the process for expulsion? I mean, you've seen the information that we have received. It's my assumption that the idea is that that information would be complete, but I just think the first step is for us to lay out what on paper should the process look like, and compare and contrast that against what are our families experiencing going through this process, because that's going to highlight the gaps, and that's how we know how to fix the system. And then the next layer is to make sure that it's consistently equitable.
Amy, just to help me understand, so you are proposing a workshop for the board with administration presenting to us what those processes are? Is that correct?
Correct.
And can I just clarify from my department, like, are you looking for the process for referral for disability? Like, are you looking for that type of stuff, or are you just specifically looking for expulsion, suspension, those referrals?
I want to know clearly what the process is for placement for 504s, IEPs, building transfers. As far as discipline, the referral process, how do students get sent to ISS or OSS, and ultimately expulsion?
Amy, the code of conduct would answer the referral. Sorry, Missy, to jump in.
No, and there's a state process, obviously, and federal for the identification. So I just want to be sure that I am gathering the right information, because there is obviously state and federal law that indicates identification for. But
so here, thank you. Here's the thing. I have heard a horror story from a family about specifically the 504 process. So if we are all clear on this is what the 504 process looks like, then we can compare and contrast that against what are our families experiencing, because it's one thing to have something on paper, but what is the practice in our buildings? That's what I want to get at. And the way we get at that is by communicating with the people that are experiencing the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And everybody, I can maybe refer to this. I don't know if it will answer your questions, but so anybody under that umbrella gets the parents' rights at the first of the year. So they understand what their rights are and what the processes is in regards to federal and state law. So I don't know if that I don't know if it'll help or not, but
no. But I think in part it is for the board, if I'm inferring correctly or summarizing correctly, it's to bring the board up to speed on what that process is, because not everyone perhaps was in that process. And I'm almost wondering, Amy, the eval, IEP, and 504 and building transfer process to me seems like a big topic in and of itself, as well as the discipline process that leads to and including the expulsion process. So I don't know if to do all of that justice in one workshop, unless we're thinking of like a full day workshop around it, or I absolutely agree, like August, we can do that. I just also want to be upfront, and I don't want to speak for Missy and her team, but I know just the IP process could be a 2-hour workshop in and of itself.
No, I completely appreciate that, and I would be open to having 2 separate workshops. And Missy, without divulging too much information, but maybe to give you kind of an idea, with the expulsion process, there is packet work that should be complete. I'm assuming that's a part of the process, like complete the packet. That is different from what we have experienced as a board. So things like that, and it's not a point the fingers, you're horrible, I gotcha. That is, that's not what I'm looking for. But it's to be brave enough to say, this is what we say we do. but
No,
this is
and
the
I-
experience of our families. And how can we make this consistent?
And I completely understand what you're saying about that packet work because I have the same concerns about that. So
right.
if that's the process, good. Like the other, like identification, expulsion, all that, I feel like those are two different things, but I'm happy to explore that piece, Amy, because I do have the same concerns as you do.
And here's my thing, like I trust the administrative team enough that these are all the things I want to review. So the 504s, IEPs, building transfers, referrals, ISS, OSS, expulsion. However, it is best for you to group those to present to us that is efficient yet thorough. I'm fine. Like I'm not picky about I want to hear this, and this day. The only thing that I ask is that we give parents and guardians enough time so that they can fully participate, so we can have both sides of the story and identify the gaps so that we can improve.
Yep. I appreciate that.
So I just want to clarify, you know, Amy, I'm sorry. I keep hearing I. And I think that's very important for all the board members. I know that you brought it up and everything, but I think it's important for all of us as a team, as a group. I think we all have concerns about that. And I think the expulsion, all of that was set, you know, for us to review. So, you know, I just want to emphasize that it's important to all of us to review that.
That's good to hear. The only reason I say I is because I don't speak for anyone other than me. I don't want to overstep and speak for other people. But I'm glad to hear this is also important to you.
And I do agree with Maria, and I see where you're coming from too, Amy, with the I, but I've heard from everyone that I think that it is equally important to all of us. And that's why we need some more reporting on it to understand it further.
So how can you put that into a step? Because my mind is starting to panic that it's, you know, we have less than an hour left and we have hardly anything tangible walking away with, you know.
That's more broad. I feel like we have to go broader than what we were.
Okay. So can we, OCD is driving me crazy. So if we go back to implicit bias and microaggression training, I can handle one thing at a time. So that's starting with Peggy's training in the end of July. So then if you look at the person or group responsible, so then is Peggy responsible for that? Who's responsible for that first step?
I would say Peg started the conversation, so Peg and I can take point on that one. I think the time frame in terms of that is we've got the start date, but this would be something we would build in across our 2021 calendar.
And so then what will the visible results of implementation or measurement? How will we measure that this was accomplished? I mean, is it simply holding the trainings or documenting the trainings?
It certainly can be at one level. If we have a self-reflective tool that I think it could be in conversation with Mark Perry to ask him, is there a self-reflection tool or something that can also provide a little bit of qualitative analysis of, I used to think this, and now after, this, my thoughts have changed in this area or something like that.
Okay. And so
another thing I would like to see is the demographic data that we have now for those groups, placements, discipline, etc. What that looks like months and what that tells us, if anything.
Yep.
So then progress to date, we would leave empty, right? Because that would only be for filling
Yeah.
us out for an update on a progress.
Correct.
Okay. So then parent guardian input regarding current processes. So what's the start date for that?
So our this is just my thought. It sounds like an opportunity for communities, community members to come in and share with the board and administration their personal experiences around these different areas. So to me, is this a community listening session? Is this a board workshop that is structured as a listening session where then we could engage families with dialogue to get clarification and understanding?
I would like to see us as a listening session, and you open it up for people. Maybe some people have had wonderful experiences with the process that we've listed. I don't want to frame it as that it's just all horror stories, but I think a listening session would be a way to open it up, and we've seen success from that in the past. If you ask people their experiences, they will show up and they will tell you. And if they know that our aim is to improve the process, I think we'll hear the information that we need.
So I think start date could be, let's say, could be in August. I'll just put the month of August as something for everyone to react to, and this is where background knowledge is huge. When are good times and good locations and good dates for families to come in? Because I want to be responsive to our community. So that may mean evening hours, that may mean weekend dates in terms of engaging the community so that they have opportunities to engage with us.
Okay. I mean, I know and I think that as we want to get this done sooner, I'm thinking about the reentry plan, for administration, everybody, September and probably beginning part of October are going to be crazy busy with just handling all of those things. And so being able to give this the time and attention that it's due, that maybe those wouldn't happen till like late October, early November.
I think that's a great idea, Kyle.
I think that's pushing it off way too far.
I think I think the problems have been here and they're big, Amy. And I think I personally think we're biting off more than we can chew. And I think we need to give all of this its due diligence. I'm afraid if we try and do too much at once, we're going to rush through the process. And I think, I guess I just said what I thought. All of these have a lot of meat to them, and I think we just need to take our time and to really delve into them.
So what about the children that are engaging with these processes until we figure out a good time for us to identify the gaps and do the work to fix them?
And I don't think that it's a question of I would disagree with what you just said. It's not about the adults. It's about us taking time to thoroughly look. We've got some huge, huge things here that we're looking at. And if I'm hurt, Kyle, if I'm understanding what you said correctly, you're talking more about the special ed things, Kyle?
Know that these listening sessions would be scheduled for the end of October, beginning of November.
Oh, for the parents.
Yeah, for the parents. Yeah.
Do you, as a district, do you send parent surveys, and do you have good results? I mean, one way to start it would be possibly reaching out to some of those families with a survey to collect some data. I don't know. Some districts don't have good response. Some, are very supportive of surveys and they use them a lot. But is that a way to get started maybe in August? I'm just throwing that out as a thought.
I mean, it could be. My other concern for our families, though, is a survey overload.
Yeah.
If we're going to be collecting data on how the reentry is going, needs. I don't want anything to get lost in the shuffle. I want to be able to pay attention to what deserves it. So that's my mind. I don't want to be sending parents, 4 or 5 surveys in a month's time.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. You're right.
I think.
Well, maybe put it. Go ahead.
Well, sorry, Louise. I think the most important feedback from our parents when school starts up is going to be feedback about how the reentry plan is going, and I think that's what we need to focus on at that point.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think that if we could get things on calendars, while there will likely be an overlap of parents who are concerned about both issues, I think because the issues themselves are so separate, I guess I just don't see the harm in just like opening up a forum earlier. I agree we don't want to bite off more than we can chew, but I also feel like if we wait to get the ball rolling, it looks as though we're not being responsive to something that is additionally important. So I guess like if we could think about scheduling a listening session situation for reentry and look at having a listening session for feedback specific to these concerns. I'm just going to read off this box, the eval, IEPs, 504, et cetera. I guess I don't see the harm in that. We have a lot of really engaged parents who probably would be excited to see multiple opportunities to provide a voice.
So Megan, are you saying all in the same month?
I mean, like, what's the harm in just getting it down so people can just like say what they need to say? I'm not saying that like it would be unreasonable, I think, to expect Dan and the admin team to be like, cool, we're going to do this all in a month and like fix everything. What I don't see the harm though in just getting some feedback, just some initial feedback from the community just to kick off a process. But of course, I would agree with you that we need to be conscientious about the time and the workload that we're placing on admin to address those issues. I guess I don't see a problem with just getting the feedback early so people understand that we have an interest in exploring these issues and seeing if there are maybe some red flags that we can immediately address. That's great. Otherwise, like we have the year to address these concerns.
So have 2 separate forums, correct?
Yeah, why not?
And if we did a virtual forum via Zoom, that's easily recorded. And again, this has been a long-standing issue. We are not looking for overnight solutions, but if you have the recorded concerns of parents and guardians, then through the process of fixing these things one by one, you have that document to go back to.
And I do like that idea, as long as parents understand that it's going to take time. I think we need to communicate that clearly.
And Stephanie, I think this is our way to, here's the thing though, is like, I feel like that is our way to communicate that clearly. Because if we do nothing, parents see inaction. If we do something and we're like, yeah, we want to hear from you, this is important, here's how this is going to look, we're going to create a timeline based on what you're saying, it's going to take time to address this, but we're so excited to have the opportunity to hear from you so we can like really take an honest, hard look and start to do the deep work that it's going to take to correct and move our district forward. If I'm a parent, I do want to hear that. But if I'm a parent and I see like, cool, they talked about this, we're not doing it for like several months, it feels like you're deprioritizing it. You know what I mean? Or it feels like we're deprioritizing.
Yeah, I see that. As long as we are very clear in that, yes, we want your feedback, because we do.
but it might take some time it's going to take time to make these changes because they didn't happen overnight.
I agree. That's going to be really important for us to message that properly. Totally agree.
Okay.
I think the feedback, I know, Amy, you had brought it up, and I think it's very important that, unfortunately, when you say you want feedback, generally that just means anybody that wants to complain about something or they had a problem or whatever. And I agree with what Amy had said. And somehow we need to make sure that hopefully we get some feedback, because I'm fearful that, we go in and we hear a couple of people that had a bad problem. Maybe it was an incident with one individual, and it doesn't speak for all the great work that's probably been done for many, many years by many employees. So then we upset the apple cart and we completely change over the system entirely just because of one or two individuals that maybe they had a bad situation. So I think I don't know how we can do that in a way, or if it is reaching out to specific families that said, yeah, I had a great experience, here's what I went through. But I think it's very critical. It's very important to include that. Otherwise, if you just say, we want to hear, you might as well say, all complaints, step forward, please.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend a facilitated process with a couple questions where you can determine, what is the strength of this process? What were some challenges you might have had? And facilitate so it's not what you say, John, because a lot of times it can get overrun by people who have not had a good situation. So I would try to facilitate a discussion rather than keep it wide open for anybody to speak about it.
And besides that, we may not be getting all the facts. And that's the other concern I have.
Exactly.
And I think the facilitator needs to be someone that is knowledgeable, that has that knowledge to be able to talk for that.
Well, here's the thing. Hopefully within the process that there has been documentation that someone still has. So if family X comes with their perspective, this is in a recorded forum. We can go back and compare that against the data that we have, because this was a district interaction. And between those two records, that should give you a more complete picture of the situation, so we can suss out what our problems are and how we can move about fixing them.
Yeah, and I would pose it as, how can the Beloit School District improve on the IEP process? Or I think, and having been through a lot of community forums, it's really a delicate balance on getting good feedback as opposed to good complaining. You know what I mean? Where you can get a lot of complaints, but how could you help us? Okay, you're not happy in this area, then do you have suggestion or a solution, or something that you could help us with? So posing it as a helping, that we want their feedback to improve the system.
And I'm really excited with how far we've come with this. I'm excited to get some dates and move on to other concerns and short-term goals that other board members want to focus on. But we can't be thin-skinned about this. If someone just comes with a complaint, I welcome that, because we're mature enough to take that complaint and make it constructive. Okay, what can we do with this information? How can we use this as a positive to make us better?
Agreed.
Right. So who's responsible, or is this, or the group, is this the board's responsibility to plan a listening session? Or multiple it, if necessary?
I'll do it. If someone would like to assist, that would be great.
Amy and I?
We're a team, Dan.
All right.
Okay, and then the time frame?
By the end of August.
Sounds like a plan.
If you want, you can throw me in there too to help out with it.
Well, and obviously if it affects IEPs and 504s, I should probably be a support person for that.
And I think I would probably add my name. This is Monica, given that there'll have to be communications, marketing, and probably news releases related to this.
Yeah.
All right. So I think if we do this again, I want to do a Google Doc so we can jump in multiple things and type.
Yeah.
So the time frame, Michelle, would be the by the end of August.
Yep.
Oh, there I see. And so then what will be the visible results of implementation or measurement of this goal or this action step?
I would say we'll have the notes from the listening session or sessions as well as the recording, because they'll be via probably Zoom or Google Meets.
And then would another measurement be that there may be some sort of a action plan or a summary or, like, I don't know, is that?
I would say using this data in conjunction that the workshop that's going to be laid out, then we can identify gaps in services.
Yep.
So comparing the on paper how the process is supposed to look to the experience, then we can identify gaps for future action.
I'd say identify gaps in conjunction with the workshop. Perfect.
Okay. So workshop on processes for IEPs, 504s, and referrals.
Mm-hmm.
The board had wanted to do a workshop on expulsions where we brought both Michaels in and talked about that that process, and then talking about the packets, which has been touched on already. So can we add expulsions in there too, just so we end into that action step where we describe what the workshops are?
Mm-hmm.
Put it in that action step spot. So it says workshop on processes for IEPs, 504s, referrals, expulsions.
Yep.
Did we agree they're going to be two separate workshops? And then however the administrative team wanted to separate them?
Yeah, the doodle could maybe look for two 3 to 4 hour time spots in August. And then administration can divide up those topics.
Mm-hmm.
So I would put, Michelle, you would probably start us off with the doodle.
And then I would say administration.
Okay.
Yep.
And so then it said day for completion by the end of August, right?
And so there I would also say identifying gaps in conjunction with the listening sessions.
And then, one other thing I can think of would be more documentation of process of behavior interventions, like in the expulsion packets? Is that?
Yeah.
Or maybe that's really specific. Maybe more thorough documentation in the packets would be like a broader.
Yep. And then I think a third would be overall board comfort and knowledge or background knowledge around these processes. So I think it can be as simple as just a debriefing discussion at the end, like what I know, what I thought I knew, and then as a result of this, now I know.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. And then exploring class size as it relates to behavior. This is an action step that I don't think has such an urgent, like August or September start date.
Yes, I agree. I think this is something that we could start the work now, but the actual timeline of providing this could be moved into, say, by winter break or something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
So my concern is, I don't know what reentry looks like, but if we have children in buildings who are capable of being expelled, can we put as a bare minimum, like before we get this fix in place, like packets have to be complete, which includes interventions. I think that's a bare minimum for any expulsion packet we would review.
In terms of the workshop and the results that come out of that.
Right. If that's going to happen in December, that's fine. But between now and December, we just...
No, we moved on to exploring class sizes. So we were talking about the results of the exploring class sizes, having that information come back and shared out by winter. So for the workshops on IEPs, 504s, referrals, and expulsions, we put one of the pieces of evidence to be more thorough documentation in expulsion packets.
Perfect. I was merging the second one with the one right above. Thank you.
No problem.
Could we add to the exploring class sizes also kind of comparing the classes that we have a para that is there to help the teacher with the classrooms?
So almost like a student to adult ratio.
Yeah, because I mean, we have teachers, or we have classrooms with teachers and paras, and then we can compare them also to the classrooms with just teachers and see it and compare roughly the same class sizes, just to see what how much it changes.
We have to be careful. 4K is really the only grade level that has paras who are available to work with the entire class. But most of the other paras that you're going to see throughout the district have a certain caseload where they're assigned to certain students.
Kyle, could you repeat that first part? I missed it.
So 4K is the only grade level really where you're going to find those paras who are available, who would really count in that student to teacher or adult ratio.
That's what I missed, Kyle. I'm sorry. Which grade?
4K.
We don't have any 4K paras assigned unless they're there for a student in 4K.
No, yeah, you have
every 4K class has a para.
You have 4K para assigns.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, a 4K. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm thinking 4 through. Sorry.
You have additional if it's a special ed para.
Right.
That would be maybe different.
Kyle, can you finish that last part though?
Yep, that's additional compared to what y'all are speaking about.
Mm-hmm. So really, 4K is the only grade where you would have that para who is really open to everyone in that class. As paras are in older grades, they're usually assigned to they have a caseload. They're assigned to certain students or a certain class of students. So they don't really impact that. I think for the purpose of this, we can't count them. Say, no, they're in Mrs. Smith's room from 1 to 2, but they're really there to help Johnny. Right?
Yeah, usually part of the IEP is when they would designate a para for certain students.
Yeah. I don't want to say, oh, but there's a para in this room.
Yeah.
Because that para isn't there to help all students. That para has a job and is specifically assigned to certain students. So that was my caveat or my warning.
That's a good point, Kyle.
But if they're assigned to those students then should not be counted in that class then, right? I mean, if a para comes in and the teacher has 17 students or 20 students in the class, and there's one para that is assigned to one student, it should be 19 then.
I would say no, John, because the teacher is still responsible for working with every student in the class, even if 1, 2, 3, however many of those students have a para assigned to them. The teacher is still responsible for instruction.
The only reason I brought it up is because, as I was saying about the times where I was going through school and they had a para in the classroom, they would always, the para would offer to take, so they had to work with Johnny, but if there's other kids that needed assistance, they would say, okay, here, we can have these 4 or 5 kids come back here and work with us together if you feel like you need that.
And I think those definitions would all have to be spelled out and parameters defined when we do this work.
Sure.
About how we're going to count those paras and those adults.
Yep.
Those children. So
you're right, Kyle. It's a legal obligation according to the IEP. So it just all depends on how it's delineated through that paperwork, and then we can look at that.
Mm-hmm. So who's going to be responsible for this work with our exploring class size as it relates to behavior? I hear birds chirping, not crickets.
This is an issue that I'm pretty passionate about. I'd be more than happy to work, with anybody who's interested if you need board support for that.
You want me to work with you, Miss Megan?
I always want to work with you, Steph.
And this is something that I think really kind of almost, I just keep hearing ad hoc committee in my brain as I'm thinking about this, because it could be a financial implication, or there could be other dominoes that fall if we decide that we need to lower class sizes. And so having that community input and that buy-in as far as perhaps spending more money, or maybe having to redistrict our elementary school so we have room for those students, you know what I mean?
I'm wondering, Kyle, if the information is brought at an initial level to give what we have, and maybe a completion step may be that this gets forwarded to an ad hoc committee for deeper exploration, and that might even be built into the strategic planning framework in terms of our short and long-term goals for the district.
School leadership can pull the actual data of pull rosters to class sizes to compare that to board policy and current enrollment and things like that.
So, Peg, am I hearing you jumping in on the work group?
Yep, I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah, and I feel like I do feel like I need to jump in on that as well.
Okay.
That sounds great.
Yep. And you can add me as well.
You might as well add me to the list as well for staffing for class size.
And guys, why is this only for behavior and not academics?
Steph, I was just gonna say that, and I feel like in addition, I feel like class size relates, since we were establishing this crack team here, if we could scooch over to that far left cube where it says exploring class sizes relates to behavior, could we add some commas to that and include academic achievement as well as equity? Because I think that there are some, I think there are equity implications to class size that we want to look at as well.
I agree.
I agree as well, but in relation to the strategic goal around behavior, discipline, that's why we limited it to there. I think the data that we can present certainly can include those pieces in there.
Okay.
And so why I think if it ultimately leads to an ad hoc committee, I agree. All of those pieces we should look at wholesale.
So how will we know that this has been implemented?
So my suggestion would be I'd like to examine the current status of class size. So I'd like us to, if we could report out on like what are our average ratios or even just the range of ratios that we have, maybe by building, like we could look at Ed K3, we have this current ratio range. At our 4.8, we have this current ratio range. At our 9.12, we have this current ratio range. I would include BLA in that as well. And then I think that if we could do some studies on looking at the data and what kinds of behavior issues we have in relationship to class size, look what other districts that are comparable to ours do, maybe we come up with like a target like median ratio or just like maybe a cap, like a top cap ratio. And maybe we do it, I would at least like to see it broken down by grade level, but I think also by subject area. And Missy, I would love to get your input on the number of students who like have IEPs, for example, like in each classroom, if there needs to be a different type of class cap there. I can't talk, sorry.
Special ed workloads too.
That's something we're digging in deeply too. So I appreciate that, Megan.
Yeah.
Well, Missy, are we still doing the practice where we put speech language kids, some of the special ed kids in clusters so that they can receive services better?
It's all that, Stephanie. I feel like I should have a better answer for you, but it all depends on student need and therapist preference. So
okay, that's fine. And Megan, thanks, Missy and Megan. I think that instead of I think each building is going to be different. For example, Converse is probably going to look different than, say, Merrill. I'm just trying to think of bigger and smaller schools off the top of my head.
Yeah. And like I hear you, that's why I want to see a range, though. You know what I mean? And we can put that information in there about like, okay, at our smaller building, this is the minimum and then maximum. But I think for the sake of building equity, which also speaks to something I've heard John talk about quite a bit, student retention and teacher retention. When we talk about retaining students, we often hear about building equity and making sure that students have equitable experiences at each of our buildings. So I think another metric should be being able to, within reason, keep class size comparable between our buildings by grade level.
We're absolutely on the same page. I'm just saying, that when we report out, I think we need to do it by building, by grade.
Great point.
Yeah, because there'll be discrepancies.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have a board presentation, right? That'd be one of or a board report.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Let's say board presentation. That sounds better.
So we are at 7:43. And I think we have one more goal that we want to talk about, and that's equity. Do you think that we'd have time to start that now? Or Kyle, or Dan, what do you think?
I'm looking, and we never really made our strategic goal or a SMART goal for this. We still have
true
to whatever our actual goal is.
Are we addressing staff retention in our, I missed that, I'm sorry.
I think we go back up to strategic goal and SMART goal because we haven't completed that yet.
Got it, I see where we are. Thanks for helping.
No problem.
Within that, does recruiting, is that involved in that?
Well, I think we're going to hold on to equity for a second. We have to actually write what our goal is as far as placement, behavior, and discipline. We have action steps, but now what is our strategic goal?
I would say, and Michelle, feel free to clean this up, but evaluate our placement and discipline processes, identify gaps, and improve our current systems.
How does that look, everybody?
I think it encapsulates from a strategic goal piece. It encapsulates all the action steps that we just articulated.
Okay.
Is the difference between the strategic goal and the SMART goal is that the SMART goal is more short term?
The SMART goal is more measurable in the short term. So the SMART goal would be, now your action steps go through the by winter break, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd say, and look at your completion things by winter break. You would have, so it's something specific. You would have your placement, discipline, and placement and discipline processes reviewed and reported on with goals to, with ideas to fill the gap. I'm thinking out loud right now, but that's something that you want to do, that this is going to be your short-term goal, your SMART goal that you're going to measure by the end of the winter break.
Okay, Louise, what are you talking about? Because I'm reading the strategic goal and the SMART goal at the top. What am I missing?
Well, the strategic goal is you're going to evaluate the placement and discipline processes, right, and identify gaps. So now what are you going to do by that? So by winter break, you will have evaluated that.
Oh, Louise, I apologize. Thank you, Michelle. I couldn't, even with my readers on, I couldn't see that tiny print.
Yeah.
And I would add in the strategic goal, identify gaps and plan for improvements to our current system, because we won't have improved it, but we will start the planning process to improve our systems.
Very good.
Thank you. That looks much better. Thank you. Sorry about that, Louise.
No problem.
Okay.
One of the challenges of virtual meetings, correct?
Oh my goodness, and getting older and with reading glasses.
Yeah.
This may be only me, and I'm absolutely comfortable with everyone telling me that. But to me, the strategic goal is the overarching goal. The action steps are the action pieces that make that goal real. And we wrote those in SMART goal format. So to me, writing a SMART goal underneath the strategic plan seems a little bit redundant to me. We have those action steps are all the SMART goals that lead to the strategic goal.
I agree. I just like having the timeline, like somewhere stated that by December 2020, we will have the evaluation and identification process completed, and then working toward a plan for improvement.
Dan, could that all I'm not up on my strategic goals like I should be. Could that all just be implemented? What Amy just said, the winter break, right up in the strategic goal, or is that a no-no?
I would agree. I think if we're comfortable with it as a group, we could simply say, yeah, by December 2020. So then we would just eliminate the SMART goal underneath it and have the action steps.
Can we say by the end of December 2020, or can we say by January 2021? Because then in my mind, that gives us December to complete those things. The way it's worded now means like we'd have to have these all done by December 1st.
Or we could say December 31st, 2020 if we want.
Yeah, December 31st is good.
Okay. So then
please, like January 1st, 2021, have a lot of stuff in the rearview mirror.
There you go. Great job, everyone.
Yay.
I think you've got some pretty solid action steps for the next couple months, and I don't know if you're going to want to add on a ton more to that within the next 2 months.
Mm-hmm. I think the outcome of this is going to be some strategic actionable goals that then will build us into the remainder of 2021, and then we'll have to be very strategic about when we do the strategic planning process. Whatever comes out of this can't get lost in that other process.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. So we just resolved. So this is I'm trying to get my brain around, so I'm going to summarize quickly. What we have in this document is a reflection of what our goals are going to be outside of the reentry plan. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. I would still say then that if we could make sure that like pay equity and staff retention makes it somewhere into this, I think that's really important. And I know we have like 9 minutes, so I don't want to push anything, and I agree with what the sentiment of not biting off more than we can chew, but it sounds, based on the last meeting we had, it sounds like there's already been a lot of work done here. I would like to see if we could look at pay equity and other staff retention measures as a top priority.
And I guess and again, this is just my perspective. I think this is, so when we think about our distribution of time, work, and effort. So we've got the whole system to still do, and by saying that this is the lever that we feel is most pressing at this point, doesn't diminish all the other pieces. All of that has to be in there. So I think it still is the conversation at the board level, like, how and when would we put in a conversation about pay equity? And it could even be an outgrowth of that last bullet item when we talk about class sizes. If we have an ad hoc committee that talks about it, that might be even an en-road in, or a piece where the pay equity conversation comes back in.
So that sounds perfect. And I just didn't want to get lost. And I think that sounds great. Thank you so much for addressing that.
And I think that's important. Kyle, do you have any idea when you envisioned your next meeting starting to go into more long-term goals?
No.
Okay. Because I didn't know if you were going to wait till the winter break or if you were going to have another one, then that way the equity one wouldn't get too far out. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, I just wanted to address part of that retention and the longevity and things that Megan is asking about are going to be part of the budget committee and the work that we're doing in there to look at pay equity and the comp model those would all be things that we would be considering and looking at as part of the budget proposal and the committee work that we have our first meeting this week on Wednesday. So, that is definitely on our agenda. It's not been lost, but I don't know that we can address all of it by winter break, but Megan, I want to assure you it's not lost in the process, and it is part of our building process.
Okay, that's really good to hear, because I was looking back at my notes and we had this scheduled to talk about last year on July 26th. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
So it sounds like we still have a lot of pieces that we want to incorporate. So, I mean, it sounds like we want to have like a staff retention and recruitment smart goal, because we do have climate survey data coming in. We have exit survey data coming in. So I'm wondering, this is a great document, and I feel like it's all fresh in my mind. So I don't know if we schedule this next meeting, this next planning session, like relatively soon, so that we kind of keep going on this momentum, or because we have one goal with several action steps.
Mm-hmm.
Am I making sense? Because we would have that. We have the equity.
Yeah, as long as it's understood that that's a component of it, that sounds great. I mean, I see that it's not in writing. I appreciate this process. I totally respect the process. I just wanted to vocalize that to make sure there's just like a mutual understanding that plays into it. That sounds fine.
What do you guys think about this? So the Google form that we use to record our future agenda items, if we code things as short, we put it there, but we code it as short-term goal or strategic plan. And then, because there might be work on this that we're not all aware of. And I think that that's going to help us with all of these things that are super important to us. Whoever puts the note, Kyle, I don't know if you put the notes in, but like with a date, like this is going to be addressed at an upcoming meeting, or this is going to this committee, because we may be able to tackle it that way. But if we label it, when we do come back and say, okay, we want to focus on the rest of our short-term goals, or we want to focus on our strategic planning, we haven't lost our pieces, even though we've been working on them individually.
Right. And that's why that option is there to choose which goal or what strategic goal that agenda item would pertain to.
Right. And one thought would be like, this gets us to say the midway point, and then really think strategically about kicking off in the 2021, so January 2021, outlining a process by which we start to collect stakeholder feedback, both in district, with the board, and in the community, around our strengths as a district, our opportunities, and our hopes and dreams. And then we can start to filter those pieces. And that's really where I think about a strategic planning process could start. So if we did the collection over the second part of this year, we could really spend the summer digging into and developing like what are those themes, and start building those pieces out. And then we could use this exact same process to put action steps under that and really think about it in terms of a 1, 3, 5, 10-year cycle.
I think that's a good way to look at it, Dan, because your next step would be strategic, and you've got a lot of things listed here that were priorities for people. So a clear strategic plan process, I think, would be very helpful for you to go through at some point when you're ready.
In the intervening time, I think that's a good idea, that planning document. If we keep that as, even if it's a tab of topics that to consider for agendizing, we put that in there, and then as things get put on the calendar, then we can come back to that and say, yep, we've addressed that. We can put those pieces in there, because it's important not to lose the opening conversation that we had today.
Okay. So.
Is everybody feeling okay?
Yeah.
All right.
So our second workshop. So when would our second short-term goal workshop be? When would it be looking to schedule that?
Do you just want to send out a doodle for that?
Well, when do we need the doodle for? I mean, I'm asking to know, when do we have to send the doodle for? Is it something we're going to do in August? And what when are we going to try to find time to do that?
For your second short-term goal meeting, Kyle, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
And that would be to address the second topic around community engagement communication.
Yeah. I mean, I think August would be. I mean, what do you guys think?
I think communication is paramount, so the sooner the better.
I agree.
Okay. So schedule it right after the forums, you mean?
Yeah. So our second meeting to create the goal for communication and engagement would be in August. Okay. So we'll have Michelle send a doodle for all of the dates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cal, feel free to get back to me later, but if you are able to answer this, how closely are we sticking to the board calendar? Because if we go back just kind of like June, July, August, things that we've documented that we want to take care of this summer, like the SRO report, dual language immersion, like, is there a place for those things as we're planning these additional things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so doodle will be coming out to find dates to schedule listening sessions, workshops, as well as continue this work for August. Anything else that we're missing in next steps? Okay.
Thank you, everyone. You were a pleasure to work with. Good luck.
Thank you.
And great work.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Any other questions, comments, or unfinished business?
I do have a question. Michelle, will you be sending this sheet out to us that we worked on tonight?
Actually, can I piggyback on that question? In addition to sending it out to us, could we also post it on Board Docs so the community can have access to it after the fact?
Do the goals, I mean, I guess now I have a question. So do we actually have to formally adopt the goals? Then that's traditional. So we haven't acted on this, right, to formally adopt this.
Should we do that before we start planning workshops, like doing the action steps?
Did you have this as part of, no, this is a workshop agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. When is your next meeting? Because what you can do is through consensus, if there's no one else if no one opposes to this plan, you can through consensus adopt it and not have to take formal action. But if there's someone that is opposing, then you need to take a vote. Let me rephrase that. Your formal action would be consensus on this plan if everybody's in agreement.
Yeah, I feel like we have consensus because no one has, spoken up or said something that they had really strong feelings against it or anything.
So then I would reflect that in the minutes. Okay. That you had consensus on moving forward with the short-term goal on behavior and discipline and placement.
And we can reformalize that later on. Maybe after we work with complete our second goal, we can adopt both
right
time and say this is our formal work for the school or for the school year.
Can we just then ask if we have consensus to move forward with adopting this first goal with the intention of moving it for formal approval after we complete the second one? Can we just like formally ask that, make sure everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, is everybody fine with that?
I'm good. Did Megan get a response? Are we gonna post this? Well, is Michelle gonna post this to board docs? Do we need consensus in order to do that?
Well, that's why I was looking for consensus and double checking action, because if it's not something that we have approved, then I didn't want it in board docs without some sort of a label that's a work in progress. I don't want it to be out there as something that's done and finalized if that's not the case.
Got it.
Okay. So it looks like it's ready to go with consensus. Are there any other questions or discussion about a journey? All right. Seeing none, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And could I get clarification, because with the questions and the discussion, I lost who moved and seconded.
I moved it and I say aye.
And I think you seconded
I
it.
second it, Maria.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So thank you. We are adjourned.
thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.